Before history recorded Custer's last stand, there was the night of quiet hoofbeats. 12 scouts, Arikara and Crow, rode through darkness while 600 soldiers slept. At first light they spotted it, smoke rising from thousands of morning fires. One scout made the ride back to deliver the news. "This plan is flawed," Big Belly warned when Custer revealed his strategy. His words echo through time as the last rational objection before catastrophe claimed 268 lives. June 24, 1876. Tension permeated the military encampment along Rosebud Creek. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer's 7th Cavalry Regiment had been tracking Sioux and Cheyenne movements for days. Intelligence suggested a large concentration of warriors had gathered in the region, but their exact location remained unknown. Crooked Horn walked briskly through camp after receiving an urgent summons to Custer's headquarters. His weathered face betrayed no emotion as he gathered 5 fellow Arikara scouts: Black Fox, Red Foolish Bear, Strikes the Lodge, Red Star, Strikes the Bear, and Bull. The group made their way silently past cooking fires and soldiers preparing weapons for the coming confrontation. "Custer calls us now," Crooked Horn told his companions in their native tongue. "Something important comes." At headquarters, 4 saddled horses belonging to Crow scouts stood outside Custer's tent, steam rising from their flanks in the cool evening air. The Arikara scouts exchanged glances. The presence of Crow allies suggested a significant mission was imminent. Inside the tent, Custer stood beside his interpreter, Gerard. The lieutenant colonel's distinctive long yellow hair was tucked beneath his hat, his blue eyes intense as he examined a crude map spread across a field table. He looked up as the scouts entered. Through Gerard, Custer addressed the assembled scouts directly. "You will not sleep tonight. You must travel ahead and locate the Sioux camp. Use every skill you possess. If by morning you haven't found them, continue until midday. Only then, if unsuccessful, return to us." Red Star, the youngest of the Arikara scouts, studied Custer's face as Gerard translated. The cavalryman's confidence seemed absolute, unwavering. Red Star wondered if such certainty was warranted given the fragmentary intelligence they possessed about Sitting Bull's forces. The Crow scouts, recognized by the Arikara as Big Belly, Strike's enemy, comes leading man with fur belt and curly head, would lead the expedition. Their intimate knowledge of the terrain made them invaluable guides. Charlie Reynolds, known to the Arikara as Lucky Man, arrived with his horse ready, prepared to serve as an additional interpreter. A white man named Mitch Byer, whom the Arikara called Man Wearing Calf Skin Vest, completed the party. His role as interpreter for the Crow scouts brought the total expedition strength to 12 men, 6 Arikara, 4 Crow, and 2 white interpreters. "The regiment will march shortly after your departure," Custer added through Gerard. "Find them before they find us." Black Fox leaned toward Red Star. "This mission carries great weight," he whispered. "Custer hunts glory in the night." The scouts mounted their horses without ceremony. The Crow scouts took the lead position, their horses moving swiftly across the rough terrain. They traveled directly from camp along the left bank of the Rosebud, following a route initially set by Custer. Several miles from camp, the scouts paused briefly to smoke. During this rest, one of the Crow scouts used hand signals to communicate their plan to the others. Red Star watched intently as the man gestured toward a distant high point. "We will reach Tall Mountain when light comes," translated Byer for the Arikara scouts. "From there, we see all hills around us. They look flat from up there. We find Sioux from that place." Strikes the Bear nodded in agreement. "Good strategy. Height gives vision." The night deepened around them as they continued their journey. The 12 scouts moved as silently as possible, each man aware that detection by Sioux lookouts would not only compromise their mission, but potentially alert the enemy to the presence of Custer's entire regiment. Red Star felt the weight of responsibility press upon him. The lives of 600 soldiers depended partly on what these 12 men might discover before the next day. As they rode, the sound of hoofbeats was muffled by the soft ground and the ambient noise of the night-shrouded landscape. "I have never seen talk die so certain of victory," Crooked Horn remarked quietly to Red Star, using the Arikara name for Custer. His eagerness for battle troubles me. Perhaps he knows something we do not, Red Star replied, though doubt edged his voice. The scouts pushed forward through the darkness, their horses picking their way carefully across the unfamiliar terrain. The Crow led with confidence, born of generations living in this territory, their silhouettes barely visible against the night sky as they guided the party toward the high ground that might reveal the location of their adversaries. What none of the scouts could know was that this night's journey would place them at the center of one of the most significant military miscalculations in American history, a prelude to disaster that would reverberate through the decades to come. The 12 scouts continued their mission across the rugged terrain. After riding for several hours, they reached a small cluster of trees and dismounted briefly. The men took advantage of this pause to smoke together, a common practice that served both as ritual and respite from the tension of their dangerous task. One of the Crow scouts signaled to the group, gesturing with his hand toward a mountain silhouette, visible against the night sky. His movements indicated they were approaching their destination. The party rode on until they reached the base of the mountain, where the lead Crow scout halted the group with a raised hand. "This is the place," Mitch Beyer translated the Crow scout's signals for the Arikara. "We climb from here." The scouts ascended the steep slope, leading their horses carefully over the rocky ground. Upon reaching the summit, they dismounted near the highest point of the ridge that overlooked their camp on the Rosebud River below. The men gathered in a small circle, smoking together in silence as the darkness gradually yielded to early morning light. Red Star observed 2 Crow scouts climbing toward an even higher vantage point on the ridge. He retrieved a small pouch of coffee he had secured to his saddle, originally intended for Bobtailed Bull from the previous night. Before he could deliver it, Crooked Horn directed him to offer it instead to the Crow scouts as a gesture of respect and cooperation. As Red Star approached the Crow scouts, a distinctive sound caught his attention. One of the Crow men had issued an owl call, clear but soft, remarkably similar to signals used by Sioux warriors. The call sent an immediate chill through the young Arikara scout. Such signals typically meant enemy presence had been detected. All the scouts quickly assembled as they noticed the 2 Crow scouts returning rapidly from the highest point of the ridge. The Crow men approached the Arikara scouts directly, touching them in a gesture of urgency and alliance. Instinctively, several Arikara scouts began to sing their traditional victory songs, their voices rising in anticipation of battle. The Crow scouts immediately motioned for silence, placing fingers to their lips and making sharp cutting motions with their hands. One of them approached Crooked Horn directly and began an animated series of hand signals. His gestures clearly conveyed that they had spotted Dakota teepees in the valley beyond. "Many lodges," Beyer whispered, translating the sign language. "Many Dakota." The entire scouting party then ascended to the highest point to confirm the sighting. The 2 Crow scouts who had made the initial discovery pointed toward the valley as Crooked Horn and Red Star strained to see in the growing light. "Look carefully, son," Crooked Horn said to Red Star. "Your eyes are sharper than mine." Red Star narrowed his eyes, focusing intently on the distant landscape. After several moments, he detected a dark shape with thin wisps of smoke rising above it, the unmistakable signature of a large encampment. While the teepees themselves remained partially hidden by the high ridge of a hill, the smoke was clearly visible as it drifted upward. "I see it," Red Star said quietly, "smoke from many fires." In the far distance beyond the smoke, Red Star noticed several black dots moving on the plain. He studied them carefully before concluding they were horses, likely part of the vast Dakota pony herd that accompanied any large village. Charlie Reynolds, the experienced scout known to the Arikara as Lucky Man, studied the scene intently. He removed his field glasses from their leather case and conducted a methodical survey of the landscape for several minutes. The group waited in silence, understanding the gravity of this discovery. Finally, Reynolds lowered his glasses, nodded to himself, and retrieved a small notebook from his pocket. He sat down, quickly wrote a note, folded the paper, and handed it to Crooked Horn. The note likely contained confirmation of their discovery and instructions for the next steps. Upon receiving the paper, Crooked Horn turned to Red Star and Bull. "Son, saddle your horse," he instructed. "Bull, prepare yours as well." As they readied their mounts, Crooked Horn pointed toward the horizon. "Look there! You can see smoke from our camp." Red Star followed his gaze and spotted a thin column of smoke rising in the distance, a clear marker showing the path back to Custer's regiment. The smoke trail provided a visible guide for their return journey. "You ride fast," Crooked Horn told Red Star. "Tell Custer what we have found." The significance of this moment was not lost on any of the scouts. They had located what was clearly a major Dakota encampment, information that would determine the next actions of Custer's entire regiment. What they could not yet know was the true size of the village, nor the fateful decisions their discovery would set in motion. "Remember every detail," Charlie Reynolds instructed Red Star before he departed. "The general will want to know exactly what we've seen." Red Star nodded, tucking the folded note securely inside his jacket. He understood that he now carried not just a message, but possibly the fate of hundreds of soldiers. Without further ceremony, he turned his horse toward the distant smoke of Custer's camp and urged it forward, beginning the crucial journey to deliver their discovery. Red Star descended the hill with determined focus, gripping his horse's reins tightly. Upon reaching level ground, he spurred his mount forward, his mind fixed solely on the folded paper tucked inside his jacket. The weight of its contents preoccupied him so completely that he barely acknowledged Bull riding beside him. Occasionally, he glanced back at his companion, noting Bull's struggling horse that labored to maintain pace. As they emerged from a low ravine, Red Star spotted the sentries posted at the perimeter of Custer's encampment. He immediately raised his hand to his mouth and called out a distinct signal, a traditional Arikara announcement used specifically when scouts returned with important intelligence. The call carried across the morning air, alerting the camp to his approach. Simultaneously, Red Star guided his horse in a deliberate zigzag pattern across the final stretch of open ground, a visual signal universally understood among plain scouts to indicate successful enemy detection. This calculated movement communicated volumes to the watching soldiers without a single word being spoken. The significance of his return was further emphasized by another Arikara tradition Red Star had prepared for. Before departing on the mission, he had told Stabbed, "If I return having found the Dakota camp, I will tie my horse's tail." In this simple act, a tradition among his people, now clearly marked his mission as successful to anyone familiar with Arikara customs. Red Star arrived at camp just as morning light illuminated the military encampment. Sentries gathered in small groups, watching his approach with evident interest. His zigzag riding pattern and traditional signals had already conveyed that he carried important news. Stabbed, an older Arikara scout, approached immediately as Red Star entered the camp. His weathered face broke into a rare smile. "My son has accomplished something truly significant," Stabbed announced, loudly enough for others to hear. For the Arikara, delivering critical intelligence of this nature conferred substantial honor and distinguished the messenger among his peers. Red Star rode past, Stabbed without stopping, dismounted near the command area, and began unsaddling his exhausted horse. The animal's flanks heaved from the exertion of the rapid return journey. Stabbed turned toward the scouts' area of the camp and called out, "Why are you still sleeping, Strikes the Bear? Red Star has returned." The commotion attracted immediate attention. Bloody Knife, Custer's trusted Arikara scout and interpreter, emerged from his tent and strode quickly toward Red Star. "Did you find them?" Bloody Knife asked urgently in their native tongue. Red Star nodded once. "We found their camp. It is large." This exchange prompted immediate activity in the command area. Gerard, Custer's primary interpreter, appeared alongside the lieutenant colonel himself. They moved purposefully toward Red Star, with Tom Custer, the commander's younger brother, following closely behind. Custer approached Red Star, who had squatted down with a cup of coffee after tending to his horse. The lieutenant colonel knelt on his left knee beside the young scout, a gesture unexpected from a commanding officer to a Native American scout that reflected the urgency of the moment. Using hand gestures supplemented by Gerard's translation, Custer directly asked Red Star, "Have you seen the Dakota?" Red Star responded with an affirmative sign, then reached inside his jacket and retrieved the folded paper Charlie Reynolds had written on the hilltop. Custer took it immediately, unfolded it, and read its contents. His expression remained unchanged as he nodded once. The scene grew tense as Bloody Knife and Tom Custer stood nearby, watching the interaction carefully. Custer looked up at his brother, then turned to Bloody Knife. Using gestures and pointing directly at Tom Custer, he made a statement that Gerard translated. "Your brother there is frightened," Custer said. "His heart trembles and his eyes dart about in fear of news about the Sioux. When we defeat the Sioux, he will finally become a man." This casual mockery of his own brother, delivered in front of subordinates, revealed much about Custer's leadership style and the complex dynamics within his command. Tom Custer, despite having earned 2 Medals of Honor during the Civil War, still lived in his older brother's shadow and was frequently subjected to his taunting. Red Star observed this interaction without comment, maintaining the stoic demeanor expected of scouts when delivering intelligence. The note he had carried, likely containing Reynolds's assessment of the Dakota village size and location, would now inform Custer's tactical decisions over the coming hours. Through Gerard's translation, Custer issued new orders to Red Star. "You will saddle your horse again immediately. We must return to the observation point." The abruptness of this command indicated Custer's urgency to verify the intelligence personally, a critical decision point that would shape the coming confrontation. For Red Star, who had just completed an exhausting night mission and rapid return journey, the order meant no rest would be forthcoming. "I need to see this Dakota camp with my own eyes," Custer added as he stood, folding Reynolds's note and placing it in his pocket. "We ride within the hour." The camp around them had fully awakened now, with soldiers preparing equipment and officers gathering for briefings. Red Star's return had set in motion the machinery of military response that would culminate in one of the most significant engagements between the U.S. Army and Plains Indians in American history. "Saddle your horse immediately," Custer commanded Red Star through his interpreter. "We're returning to where your group waits on the hill." Red Star had barely begun his breakfast after the exhausting night ride. He moved to comply with such haste that his foot knocked over his coffee cup, spilling the dark liquid across the ground. Without pause for regret or cleanup, he secured his saddle and joined the hastily assembled party. The entourage consisted of a small but significant contingent: Lieutenant Colonel Custer himself, his bugler, his younger brother Captain Tom Custer, interpreter Gerard, and 3 trusted Arikara scouts, Bloody Knife, Bobtailed Bull, and Little Brave, alongside Red Star. This selective group suggested Custer wanted to personally verify the intelligence while maintaining operational security. They rode rapidly toward the observation point, horses kicking up dust as they left camp. Behind them, a bugle call rang out across the encampment, likely signaling preparation orders for the regiment. Custer briefly turned his mount back, calling instructions to his bugler before rejoining the group. Using hand signals, Custer asked Red Star about the distance to the hill. Red Star responded with gestures indicating it was relatively near. The group maintained their pace, the horses' hooves drumming steadily against the hard ground as they followed the route Red Star had traveled twice already within the past 12 hours. Upon reaching the base of the hill, Red Star pointed upward, identifying their destination. The party dismounted and began ascending on foot, leading their horses up the steep incline. At the summit, they found the remaining scouts still maintaining their observation position. Charlie Reynolds immediately approached Custer, and the 2 men walked ahead of the group to a specific vantage point, leaving the others behind. Reynolds pointed toward the distance, directing Custer's attention to a particular area of the landscape. They studied the view intensely before Gerard joined them. After several minutes of observation, Gerard turned back toward the waiting scouts and called out, "Custer does not believe it is a Sioux camp." This unexpected statement created immediate tension among the scouts who had spent hours confirming their discovery. Reynolds appeared visibly frustrated, as Custer apparently insisted that what Reynolds identified as teepees were merely white rock formations of the distant ridge, partially concealing what might be a single, isolated lodge. "No, General," Reynolds said firmly, pointing again with greater emphasis. "Look beyond the rocks to the valley floor. See the smoke patterns. Those are cooking fires from many lodges." Custer adjusted his position slightly and studied the landscape again. After a prolonged silence, his posture changed subtly, indicating a shift in his assessment. He finally acknowledged seeing signs of an encampment. Seeking further confirmation, Reynolds retrieved his field glasses from their case and handed them to Custer. The lieutenant colonel raised them to his eyes, focused carefully, and spent several minutes scanning the distant valley. When he lowered the glasses, he nodded once, a tacit admission that Reynolds had been correct. Crooked Horn, observing this exchange, conferred briefly with the other scouts before approaching Gerard. He instructed the interpreter to ask Custer a specific question. How would the general feel if we encountered 2 dead Dakota on the hill where we conducted our observations earlier? Gerard translated, and Custer's eyebrows raised slightly, prompting an explanation. Through Gerard, Crooked Horn revealed that after Red Star and Bull had departed with their message, the remaining scouts had observed 6 Dakota warriors in the vicinity. 2 had crossed over the ridge and descended into a dry ravine, while 4 others had entered a wooded area at the base of the hill. The scouts, Crooked Horn explained, believed the 2 Dakota warriors intended to ambush any messengers traveling between the observation post and Custer's camp. The scouts had considered eliminating this threat, but had hesitated, uncertain if Custer would approve such action without orders. "It would be acceptable," Custer replied through Gerard. "In fact, I would welcome finding 2 dead Dakota scouts." This response revealed Custer's tactical mindset. He clearly prioritized operational security and was willing to authorize preemptive action against potential threats. For the scouts, this retroactive approval validated their assessment of the danger, though the opportunity for action had already passed. The group settled into a more deliberate observation of the distant valley. Big Belly, also known as Half Yellowface, one of the senior Crow scouts, rose to his feet and approached Custer. Through his interpreter, he asked pointed questions about Custer's assessment of the Dakota camp they were observing. Custer's response revealed his strategic thinking. "This camp has no knowledge of our presence. None of their scouts have detected us." This confident assertion, made despite the scouts' report of Dakota warriors in the immediate vicinity, demonstrated Custer's growing conviction that he maintained the element of surprise. It was a critical assumption that would shape his subsequent tactical decisions. Big Belly exchanged glances with Crooked Horn. The Crow scout's expression revealed skepticism, though he did not immediately challenge Custer's assessment. Years of experience tracking and evading Dakota war parties had taught the native scouts to recognize signs of awareness that might go unnoticed by European-trained military officers. "The Dakota never sleep with both eyes closed," Big Belly murmured in his native tongue to the other Crow scouts. "They see more than this yellow hair thinks." The statement went untranslated, but the tension among the scouts was palpable. Custer continued his observation, seemingly satisfied with his assessment and already formulating his battle plan. The contrast between his confidence and the scouts' growing concern established a division that would only widen as the day progressed. For Red Star, who had ridden through the night to deliver his critical message and now found himself witnessing this pivotal exchange, the implications were becoming clear. Custer's interpretation of the intelligence they had gathered, and his apparent dismissal of the scouts' warnings about Dakota awareness, would dictate the fate of hundreds of soldiers in the hours to come. Big Belly rose to his full height, his weathered face set with determination as he directly challenged Custer's assessment. Through the Crow interpreter, he delivered his objection with unmistakable conviction. "You claim we have not been detected," Big Belly stated firmly, "but the Sioux we observed at the base of the hill, 2 going one direction and 4 another, are not ordinary warriors. They are skilled scouts who have already noticed the smoke from our camp." Custer's face hardened with irritation. The lieutenant colonel was unaccustomed to having his military judgments questioned, particularly by indigenous scouts, regardless of their experience. "I repeat," Custer replied tersely through Gerard, "we have not been detected. That camp remains unaware of us." He straightened his posture before continuing. "I will proceed according to my assessment. I intend to wait until nightfall before advancing, then surround the Sioux camp with our forces." This strategy reflected standard U.S. Army doctrine for engaging indigenous encampments. A night approach followed by a dawn attack had proven effective in previous campaigns. Such tactics maximized surprise while minimizing the ability of warriors to mount an organized defense or facilitate civilian escape. Big Belly shook his head emphatically. "This plan is flawed and should not be executed," he declared without hesitation. His directness violated military protocol, but reflected the gravity with which he viewed the situation. Around them, the other scouts exchanged glances. Such explicit contradiction of a commanding officer was unusual, but the stakes were extraordinarily high. The Crow Scouts, traditional enemies of the Sioux, possessed generations of tactical knowledge about Dakota warfare patterns. "I have stated my intended course of action," Custer responded, his tone indicating the discussion was concluded. "I will wait until darkness falls and proceed with my strategy." Red Star observed this exchange with careful attention. As the youngest of the Arikara scouts, he initially found merit in Custer's approach. A night maneuver could potentially preserve the element of surprise while allowing the regiment to position itself advantageously. Military logic suggested surrounding the village before initiating combat would maximize effectiveness while minimizing casualties. However, the Crow Scouts, led by Big Belly, mounted a coordinated counter-argument. Speaking rapidly in their native language with occasional translations, they outlined a fundamentally different tactical assessment. The Dakota Scouts, they explained, had undoubtedly detected military presence in the region. These scouts would alert the main force, potentially leading to a preemptive attack on Custer's troops while they were still organizing. The Crow Scouts proposed an alternative: immediate action that same day, with particular attention to capturing or scattering the Dakota horse herd. This strategy recognized the central importance of horses in plains warfare. Without ready access to their mounts, Dakota warriors would be severely restricted in mobility and fighting capacity. "Attack now," urged Half Yellowface, another name for Big Belly. "Target their horses first. Without horses they cannot fight as they wish to fight." This recommendation reflected sophisticated understanding of plains combat dynamics. Horse herds represented both military capability and cultural wealth for indigenous nations. Disrupting the herds would create tactical advantages while simultaneously causing significant disorientation within the camp. The intensity of the scouts' conviction appeared to register with Custer. After a moment of consideration, he offered an unexpected response. "Yes, it will be done as you suggest." This apparent acquiescence surprised the scouts. Custer had built his reputation on bold, decisive action rather than deference to others' tactical assessments. Whether his agreement represented genuine reconsideration or merely a diplomatic end to an uncomfortable confrontation remained unclear. As this critical discussion concluded, the advance elements of the 7th Cavalry arrived at the base of the hill. Custer's party descended to join the main force, the pivotal strategy meeting having reached its ambiguous conclusion. Red Star watched Custer carefully as they rejoined the regiment. The lieutenant colonel's expression revealed little about his true intentions. Despite his verbal agreement with the scouts' recommendation, Custer's subsequent commands would determine whether he had genuinely embraced their advice or merely appeased them temporarily while maintaining his original plan. The events of the next few hours would transform this remote Montana landscape into contested ground and ultimately into one of the most analyzed battlefields in American history. For the scouts who had located the Dakota encampment and attempted to shape the military response, their role in this unfolding drama was both central and tragically limited by the command structure within which they operated. By midday on June 25, 1876, Custer divided his regiment into 3 battalions despite the scouts' warnings for a unified approach. As the 7th Cavalry prepared to move out, Red Star watched Custer issue commands that contradicted the very strategy he had verbally accepted minutes earlier. The scouts had fulfilled their duty, locating the massive Dakota encampment and providing tactical assessment based on generations of warfare experience. Yet Custer's confidence overrode their counsel. Within hours, this fateful decision would transform the valley into a killing ground where 268 soldiers would fall. The scouts' unheeded warnings would echo through history alongside the name Little Bighorn.